Hello and welcome to another edition of Active Living. We're very fortunate today to have Ron Spittler. Ron Spittler worked for the Department of Natural Resources and was the district fisheries biologist. Ron has a very important project that he'd like to talk to us about today, and it actually affects Lake Orion and Paint Creek. Welcome to our show, Ron.
Thank you, George. It's a pleasure to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background? You know, you were a kind of a big guy there at the Department of Natural Resources, and I understand you used to do a weekly radio show with J.P. McCarthy.
Yeah, we did a fishing report on Friday mornings, nice and early. It was a lot of fun, and I worked for the DNR for 31 plus years, and 28 of them were right here in Southeast Michigan. So I got kind of comfortable and acquainted with the areas, and we've lived in Lake Orion for quite a long time, most of that period, in fact. But I've been retired 20 years now, so it's been a long, long time. But this story, the Lake Orion bottom draw, which drew water from the depths of Lake Orion and deposited at the base of the dam going into Paint Creek, was probably one of, I guess I'd brag and say, crowning achievements that I had, and I'm very proud of what we did, and it's still working just fine today.
Well, why in the world would you draw water from the bottom of Lake Orion and put it into Paint Creek?
Oh, that's a good question, George, and the answer is, well, a little complicated. Paint Creek is from Lake Orion Dam down to the Clinton River at Rochester is our premier trout stream in Southeast Michigan. It's not a big stream, but it's a good fishing stream. It's got a lot of public access, and there are very few waters that trout fishermen can fish unless they go a long way from here. And since we have about half of the trout fishermen in the state living in Detroit with everybody else in Southeast Michigan, I got to thinking maybe there's a way to create more trout water in this part of the state, and the one way to do that will be to take a dam somewhere, and there's a lot of lakes with dams, and put water over the dam or under the dam.
Right.
It's colder from the lake bottom instead of the lake surface, make the stream colder for the trout downstream.
Now, what is the deal on the trout? Do they require a certain temperature?
Right, they're called cold water species, where your bass and pike and panfish are all warm water species, and the difference is right about mid-70s. Anything below 75, let's say, is more suitable or tolerant for trout and salmon, and anything normally above that temperature is ideal for the other fishes. So Paint Creek, most of it is cold enough for trout, but there's a long stretch below the dam here that was too warm because of the water flowing over the dam in midsummer being up in the upper 70s, low 80s, surface water going through the structures.
Good to swim in, but not so good for trout.
That's right. And it was really a big challenge. We couldn't find any suitable places to do what I had in mind. But then we got to thinking, and I got to talking with an engineer. It's feasible in that the water right behind the dam is shallow, and it goes a long way before it starts to get deep.
Okay.
So you can't just put a hole through the dam per se and dump the cold water through there. It's a long way out to the deep basin, and we're looking at over 50 feet of water. We wanted 65 feet of water because in the summertime, the water temperature cools as it goes down deeper and stays cold, where the surface water is quite warm and doesn't sink.
Okay.
Just remember when you were younger and took a deep dive out in the middle of the lake and you felt the water getting cooler as you went down, then all of a sudden, holy old man, what's this? It's like going into a freezer.
Right.
That's the thermocline. It's like a solid window that you go through.
Mm-hmm.
And that area below that, the thermocline, is cold and lacks oxygen because it's not mixing with the surface.
Right.
So when the winds blow, it's just the upper waters that will support fish and other creatures for the most part. And that normally runs about 20 feet in lakes around here.
Okay.
So you got that much water for the fish to live in at that time of the year. Well, the idea we came up with was to place a 18-inch inside diameter corrugated outside plastic pipe out 740 feet into Lake Orion and sink it down to the bottom in 65 feet of water where the temperature was in the mid-50s at most. And then we'd put the pipe into a structure which was a manhole 6 feet across and
Right.
11 feet deep. Comes in there, and then we have boards in slots on either side of the manhole that we built up as a dam, and you could place a board or take a board out depending on how much water you wanted to flow.
So you could control how much water goes out of this 18-inch pipe just by building your own little dam inside this structure.
Exactly. So you have a dam hiding in that control structure that's similar to the dam that the water normally flows over.
Right.
Now the problem from there, which was pretty big, was that we have a 5-lane highway between the structure and the stream down below the dam.
You're talking about M24.
M24. So
Now the
that
tricky
was
part of putting the water below the dam was the 5-lane highway, M24, that goes right above us here. We hired a boring crew, not boring, but a drilling crew that bores with their drill to dig a hole right under the road all the way across. Then they put a steel pipe in. Then they put the black plastic pipe that we drain the water through that. So it's very secure, it's never going to collapse. And they connected it to the apparatus up above to bring the water from the lake down to the discharge.
And we hired a crew to come in and drill a hole, bore a hole under the road about 26 inches in diameter, taking out big boulders and cutting up big chunks of timbers left over from the old days. And they drilled all the way under there. Then they put a 65-foot steel pipe through there, and then our 18-inch inside diameter pipe, which is, by the way, between my elbows.
Right.
That's about 18 inches, so it's not all that big. We did that, and then we hooked it up to the upper, or the bottom side, the downstream side, if you will, of the manhole.
Okay.
Now we've got everything ready below, and we put rocks. We put the tube out through the ground above the water level and put a lot of rocks down for the water to splash over before it got in and mixed with the water from the dam, simply because there was no oxygen in the bottom of the lake.
Okay.
So we bring the cold water with some nasty gases in it, splash it over the rocks to get rid of the nasty gases, bring in the oxygen. Now we can mix it safely and the fish will like it.
So you created your own little waterfalls coming out
Exactly.
of this input into the stream.
Exactly. So that took care of a number of things right there. Now we had to get that darn pipe out in the middle of the lake in 65 feet of water and sink it. So we, in September of '91, we brought in a whole bunch of our DNR boats and a crews from other districts and a whole bunch of those 20-foot lengths of that 16-inch pipe, a bunch of rope, and a bunch of, what are they?
Weights to
Weights, yeah, what was I thinking of, to sink them down. So we started floating the pieces out and putting them together. They had to hook together with certain couplings and float them all the way out to the deep water. And on the end, I didn't want to leave a big 16 or 18-inch hole for water to be sucked in all at once, because I just could see an adventurous diver going out there
Oh yeah.
and taking a look and getting sucked,
It's sucked into it.
against it or into it and have a little problem. So
Right.
we put a cap over that. Then I had one of the guys get a hole saw about yay big and start cutting holes through all over the last 5 feet of the pipe and on the end of it.
Okay.
So that allowed a lot of water to flow through, and if you went down and laid your body over that pipe, you wouldn't stick to the draw from those holes enough to keep you there. So
Okay.
we wanted to be safe.
Sure.
And a lot of people don't know we did that.
How about fish now? They could get sucked in there, right?
If there were fish there, and they normally aren't in the summertime, they might be that deep in the winter. But by and large, nothing would really get sucked
Okay.
into it. But if it did, it'd just float right through the whole
They
system.
go right through into the river.
Yeah, nothing to stop it.
Skip the dam.
You betcha, you betcha. So now we got the pipe on the surface out there, 740 feet from the manhole. And we start from the far end, and we leave a boat out there holding it up, and we start placing the weights all the way back, and periodically we leave a boat holding it up. And it took quite a while, and we finally got it out straight where we wanted it.
Right.
And dug a trench out into the water so that the pipe would be under the surface deep enough not to be damaged by boats or anything.
Right.
And we hooked the ends of the pipe together from the one that goes into the manhole, and then we sunk the whole thing. And lo and behold, water started flowing through that structure. And I got to be honest, a number of the crew members came there with doubts. This isn't going to work. Well,
If it didn't work, that was probably the end of your job, right?
yeah,
Ron?
I'd have been retired early. Exactly, but the water was going to flow, seek its own level,
Right.
and it was below the surface of the lake, so there was pressure there to keep on going.
Sure.
And unless we stopped it with the stop logs inside the structure, it was going to flow. So it worked beautifully. The water temperature was in the 50s, and it's been operating ever since.
Now, does this go all year round, or does this just go when you need to cool the river?
Another good question. It works year-round, and I'll throw a little biology at you.
Careful now. This could be dangerous, Ron.
Well, somebody may understand it.
Okay, go ahead.
You look at the biology of the water column, top to bottom, and in the spring, you've got water that's warming up, but it's been frozen at the top,
Right.
and it mixes top to bottom, and that's healthy. It allows the fish to move around more, brings some nutrients up that have been accumulating over winter, and it just builds up more aquatic organisms. And in the summertime, you get your thermocline,
Right.
and the most dense water is the coldest until it reaches freezing, and then it floats to the top.
Right.
It stays at the top. Okay, and you've got that layer that's dead water, dead plants, dead fish, who knows what else sinks to the bottom.
Okay.
And that's a lot of nutrients. Normally, in the fall, you get the reverse. You get a fall turnover, and it breaks up the thermocline and brings up the nutrients. Now you might get that algae
Okay.
that colors the water, and people don't like it too well
Right.
because it doesn't look good and it sticks to you when you're swimming. Well, we certainly diminished that because we're drawing water all summer
Right.
through the tube and taking those nutrients down to the trout, which wouldn't normally get them because they're stuck on the bottom.
Right.
So like a battery discharging,
Sure.
which you wouldn't get over the dam.
Right.
So it's cooling the water, it's adding more nutrients, and everybody loves that downstream. But at the same time, George, is lowering the temperature column because it's taking it off the bottom.
Right.
Now, instead of having a livable area of 20 feet and above, let's say where the thermocline normally is,
Right.
we've got another 10 feet
Okay.
in 3 basins in that lake because there's a deep connection between the main basin where the tube is
Right.
and the other 2 basins. So,
So you could fit a lot more fish in the lake, is what you're saying.
yeah, we can
Especially bass that you like to catch.
Oh yeah, and bluegills and everything else. And in doing this, it brings more food, more space and opportunity for a higher population of fish there, and the trout are doing well downstream. Now, why do we do it in the wintertime? In the wintertime, you still got that cold water. It's still probably in the 50s or so, top to bottom actually.
Right.
But water that would go over the dam now is right under the ice, super cold.
Right.
And as soon as it gets down below the dam, for some distance, it's going to stay really cold.
Right.
And when it's right there hovering around 32 degrees, it freezes.
Mm-hmm.
It sticks to rocks, it sticks to the bottom, it kills aquatic organism. It's called frazzle ice. It's very common in streams that have real shallow water that are exposed to really cold air. So warmer water coming through the tube mixes with the cold water from under the ice and prevents frazzle ice.
So it does the opposite function that it does in the summer.
Exactly. Good point.
It heats up the river versus cooling it in the summer.
Yep. So
Interesting.
it really it really does a nice job. And what we get is about 4 more miles of trout water downstream in the summertime,
Okay.
and a healthier piece of water in the wintertime. So, you know, was it worth it for all the money we spent? I suppose I would say yes, just
You're a
because
trout
I'm
fisherman,
prejudiced.
it's obviously worth it, right?
Yeah, yeah, and we had help, by the way, from the Challenge chapter, the Clinton Valley chapter, and the Paul Young chapters of Trout Unlimited, the Michigan Wildlife Habitat Foundation, and approvals from Orion Township as well as the village, plus money that came from our Game and Fish Protection Fund
Right.
to fund the project. That's out of fishing and hunting license monies. So that's kind of where we were, but it just was a win-win for the lake and for the stream.
Right.
And time allowing, and I think we've got time,
Oh, yeah.
people at the meetings, when we had public meetings to get approvals, and it was tough because a lot of people thought, well, if you're going to put a hole through the road and put water in it and start draining our lake, what's to keep it from draining dry and ruining the lake for us? Well, I mentioned the controls already.
Right.
And those are pretty solid. They've been in there for 26 years, and there's been no problems at all. And the pipe will be there forever.
Now, who controls how much comes out of that system? Is that the DNR that does that?
Actually, it's a cooperation between the village and the
Oh,
DNR.
is that right?
For the
Okay.
most part, we do the control.
Okay.
But they call us if they're concerned. And an agreement that we reached with them when we put it in was that when there's no water going over the dam, there's concern about having enough water to keep the lake deep enough for boats and
Right.
everything. We can't let water go through the tube.
Okay.
So I suspect there may be a dozen adjustments this summer in the boards to control the water flow.
Okay.
And you and I were just out there last week, and it was flowing nicely, as was the dam. And I want to go back to that in a minute. But so we're agreeing with the village to control the water and make sure it does what they want it to do.
Right.
Don't want to dry up the surface, lower the water a bit. But by the same token, people were still worried about us possibly draining the lake. Well, that can't possibly happen. And I did some math. I'm not a good mathematician, but I used my calculator. And Lake Orion is 500.
You didn't use a slide rule.
No, I left that in the box
I know
at
you go
home.
back a little ways, Ron.
Yeah, I do have one. I couldn't use it if I wanted to. But the lake is 506 acres. And the flow that normally goes to the tube was measured by engineers for a full summer to make sure what's going on. And the average flow through the tube on a normal year is around 9 cubic feet per second. Now, if you take all of the water that would come into the lake from Pink Creek above, you know, the dams,
Right.
any little tributaries, any runoff, any springs, and stop evaporation, so the only water leaving the lake went through the tube.
Right.
I mean, that's an extreme. It would take a month to drop Lake Orion 1 foot, with the average of 9 cubic feet per second going out. Now, carrying that further, the maximum we could get out of the tube with all the boards out was 14 cubic feet per second.
Okay.
So it's physically impossible to take more through that tube. And when you figure that out with the same scenario I gave you,
Right.
it would take 18 days to drain the lake 1 foot.
Okay.
Now, that being said, it's impossible to have that happen. It's just not going to happen. You're going
Right.
to get rain, you're going to get your water coming in, you're going to get
Right. But
springs.
they do lower the level occasionally.
Yeah, in
like
fact,
every 3 or 4 years.
This
right?
fall will be the 5-year lowering for 3 feet.
Okay.
Now, if they wanted to wait 3 months, we could do that through our tube, but they have a bypass themselves, and they
Right.
use that. Interestingly as well, people worry about us draining the lake all the way down. Well, that can't happen either, because the bottom of that structure and the tubes are approximately 5 feet below the surface of the lake.
So you can never go more than 5 feet down.
Exactly, it'll dry
Lower
up.
the normal level.
Exactly. So, wanted to get that out because I thought that was really important for people to know.
So in doing this whole project, I'm sure you must have run up against some real problems with either the engineering side, the construction side, or the political side. And you've talked about a little bit about the political side, getting
Yeah.
people to agree to lake levels and so on. But on the construction side, you must have run into some issues there as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, first thing is, how the devil can we do it? Because that looked pretty monumental. You got the deepest waters way out, 750 feet away
Right.
from shore, and we got that highway to go under.
Yeah, I'm thinking the highway is the big one. Now,
Yeah.
I'm sure you had to go to the highway department to get approvals to go underneath
Oh yeah,
the road.
you're right. Yep,
And-
didn't mention that.
And when you're running that 18-inch tube through there, I got to, like you said, you run into boulders, you run into wood, you run into all kinds of stuff. And how did they clear that stuff out of there?
Well, I would
Or did
hope.
the drill go right through the boulders?
Don't they wish? Anyhow, it's a pretty big auger, and I think it was more like 26 inches to get everything through that hole. And it's my best guess. I didn't watch him do it. A guy had to crawl in up to 65 feet through that thing from the opening. They'd have to pull the whole thing out, let him crawl in there, and if it was a boulder, hopefully it was small enough to come back out the hole. Now, maybe there was a cable or something he could put around that and have him drag it out with the winch later on. Or maybe he grabbed it with his arms and they pulled a rope all around his ankle and tugged him out. But I don't know. It would take a lot of guts to do.
Yeah.
I would never crawl in there.
No.
But with wood, he'd have to take a saw in, an electric saw, and cut through the wood
Really?
and then drag that out. Yeah, I mean, it took a long time. They had delays because of that. And then when they got it all done, they had to hook it up to everything, and well, it did a beautiful job. And
Yeah.
it took a lot of effort, but you know, it took a lot of engineering to get to that point, and we're just certainly glad we had support from Lansing and from the community to get it done. So, you know, the idea of the pipe, though, we thought originally, well, what if we just pull it up to the dam and then make a siphon out of it over the dam and let it dump down in there and have a valve somewhere? And the more we thought about that one, that just wasn't going to work.
No.
There are siphons over dams where the pipe actually gets above the water level,
Right.
and like drawing water or gasoline out of a tank, you
Right.
have to pull it over the top. But that was out of the question. We just weren't going to do that. So we.
So do you
know.
guys now, do you stock trout in this stream,
Oh yeah,
Paint Creek?
yeah. In fact, the first year after when we started to operate the following spring, we planted 500 trout right there in the park, just below the dam.
Okay.
And they thrived in there all summer long, and oddly enough, people would fish for them and release them because they wanted to see them swim around right there.
Fantastic.
So they were kind of respecting the project. And I imagine they're planted there today in that location as well as downstream several locations. But Paint Creek has some brook trout that naturally reproduce in there as well, and a couple tributaries, which are pretty private, unfortunately. 20-inch 20-inch brown trout are caught out of there every year, so
Wow.
it's not a small accomplishment to catch a nice trout. And because it's only got the dam downstream on the Clinton River at Yates Mill, we have occasional salmon and steelhead come up there seasonally,
Really?
all the way into the stream. So a fisherman could get quite surprised by a 15-pound salmon staring at him. But you know,
Yeah, right.
it's a beautiful piece of water.
Yeah. That's quite a project.
Yeah, it was a big challenge. And like I say, there were skeptics, but they came up to me afterwards and said, well, we didn't think it would work. We weren't sure we wanted to be here, but we're glad we came and helped.
But you got it done.
Yeah. So I mean, you don't get a chance to do something special very often, but this, I want to see more studies done on it, and they are going to survey Paint Creek 3 years in a row beginning this next year,
Are they?
and that will tell us a lot about the health of the fish. Excuse me. And,
Now, I assume somebody occasionally checks the temperatures and finds out whether or not this thing is really working.
yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. You're just coming up with good gems today. When we first did the project and studied it that whole first summer in '92, and that was an intense project because we wanted to be sure of everything, the maximum water temperature in the tube was 53 degrees.
Okay.
You and I saw 65 degrees in the stream, or in the tube
Right.
last week. This has been a hot summer. It's also part
Yeah.
of global warming. Water over the dam was 84 degrees. The warmest it was in 92 was 79 degrees.
Okay.
The mixed temperature was 74, I believe,
Okay,
right
so
below
that's-
the dam.
That's well below the temperature, like the 80-degree temperature, the
would kill
cutoff
the trout.
point
Yeah.
that you were talking about earlier about
Yeah.
what trout like to survive in.
Yeah, and they'll be okay there with that temperature. That's probably the hottest it'll get all summer. And then as it goes downstream, it cools some shade and occasional springs come in, things like that. So
Right.
it's just, I mean, the 82 going over the dam straight down would mess up most of that 4 miles.
Right.
But in this case, it worked out pretty well, and it has changed. It has changed.
Well, you know, it's like you said, it's a huge project. It was kind of an experimental project for the first time.
Yeah.
You know, was that the first time it's been done in Michigan, or had it been done?
A project like that with the tubing under the road and running a pipe out that far into a lake, I would have to say yes. I doubt many, if any, project's been done
Right.
like that around the country.
Well, you had your neck stuck way out on that one, right, Ron?
Yeah, I accepted the challenge, but
Well,
I
it's
just
great.
wanted to do it, and I got the support that I needed, and we got it done. I mean, the crew did a heck of a job, and if it hadn't been for everybody to come together with all the approvals and all that effort, it just wouldn't have gotten done.
And now all the trout fishermen in the area can come and say, Ron, thank you, right?
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Still waiting, huh?
No, they've said that, and we've always worked together well. It's always been fun with the sportsmen that supported our programs.
Well, Ron, it's been great having you on the program. You've done a terrific job.
Thank you,
I'm
George.
sure there are a lot of people in Lake Orion that had no idea that this thing was going on, including myself, that, you know, that the state had done such an effort to provide good fishing for the people in the area.
Well, that's what our job is, and the guys that are there behind me and are still working are trying to do the same thing. Just keep it going.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, Ron. And you've been listening
My
to
pleasure.
you've been listening and watching Active Living today with our special guest, Ron Spittler. Thanks for watching.